This past weekend, Phantasmal Flames became legal for the first time in official tournaments, and the regional in Stuttgart was the first place people were able to play some of these cards. Obviously, we just come off the back of LAIC, so there was still kind of this metagame that had formed, but we were ready to jump in and try out some new cards. Obviously, the set hasn't had massive implications in terms of changing the metagame, but there were at least some differences in decks, and there was a really cool new archetype that sort of came about because of a new card. So today we're going to be going through all of the regional Stuttgart results, taking a look at the metagame, some of the different deck lists that did well, and also running through some of the different sort of decks that kind of were popularized from the Phantasmal Flames set that were brand new archetypes as well, which is really cool. So we're over on Limitless as usual, and kicking things off with the day 2 metagame. Really interesting. We kind of saw pretty much the exact same thing as before. If I switch over to the overall metagame to begin with, we can see there's a lot of Gholdengo. As we expected, Gholdengo is still by far the most popular deck. It was 15% of the metagame when we don't group things, so 15% of the metagame still going towards Gholdengo. I still think it's by far the best deck. It's the most powerful deck. It's the deck that has the highest ceiling, I think. So yeah, not too surprised to see Gholdengo still being super popular, and also got a couple of interesting cards that you could potentially play in the deck, things like the Lopunny from the new set, or the new Ceruledge variant of Gholdengo. So I think there will have been a lot of people still like relying on Gholdengo to be good, so not surprised to see it still as popular. Just flipping back over to the graphics as well, you can see there was a lot of unclassified decks that were marked as unclassified. I think this was primarily down to new archetypes, things like the Lopunny Dusknoir and stuff like that, all being lumped into here. Because we don't have like a defined list for Lopunny Dusknoir, I don't think it necessarily would have like picked up exactly what it describes as a Lopunny Dusknoir deck, which is why they all ended up getting lumped into this classification, because there actually were a fair few in day 2. So that would reflect like it's still being quite popular on day 1, and we can take a little bit of a better look at the breakdown in a second on the on Limitless Labs as well. But the official graphic showed a lot of unclassified. Obviously, Gardevoir was still really popular. Dragapult was still really popular. And Mega Absol Kangaskhan was also really popular for day 1. So yeah, nothing too crazy in terms of like new archetypes. I was surprised Charizard wasn't up here. But I think if you broke down this, because you can see the best of the rest from day 1, you then, like Charizard was split up, but this was collectively 10%. If you actually combine the Charizards together, it ends up higher than the unclassified, and if you get rid of the unclassified, it easily ends up on this graphic to be Gholdengo, Dragapult, Charizard, Gardevoir, Mega Absol, which I think is, widely established as most of the best decks. I think Gholdengo, Dragapult, Gardevoir are all up there right now. So yeah, not too surprised to see it not being on there because of the way they've split it, but I do think splitting it was kind of like a weird decision, because I think Charizard, even though they split it based on basically whether they were playing Dusknoir or not, I still think it was worth putting them together, because it's still a Charizard deck at heart. And whilst we see like there's different ways of playing Charizard, I still think it's better represented than this unclassified, I guess. So I think it was I think that makes this graphic look a little bit worse. When you actually dig into the numbers, I think it looks a little bit more, or it makes a little bit more sense, right? Then Marnie's Grimmstyle and Ceruledge, as well as Zoroark and Alakazam actually making it onto the best of the rest graphic, which is kind of funny. I think once upon a time this would probably would have been counted in the unclassified graphic. But Alakazam Dunsparce getting onto the graphic is kind of funny. It did gain a massive buff from Dawn. I'm still pretty sure it can't be any Dragapults and any Gardevoirs right now. They take multi-prizes against you way too easily and aren't reliant on multi-prizes themselves to do it sometimes. Or if they are, they can take, like, Dragapult can so easily board wipe, and Gardevoir can do it, can easily take multiple prizes with Monkey Dories. Yes, they probably have a Gardevoir out, but again, they can take multiple prizes to try and overtake you and force you to have to take the Guardy every turn and stuff like that, and it's just a little bit awkward. So yeah, the archetype really can't deal with either of those two archetypes, but it's very good at dealing with like some of the more aggressive 2-prize archetypes, things like the Gholdengos and the Ceruledges, where they have to be evolving into you, because obviously Solrock and Lunatone aren't really going to do enough against Alakazam. They have to be evolving into you to be able to knock you out, and you're easily able to trade up on them. So I can see why Alakazam picked up some traction, I guess, for this tournament. It gained a huge card in Dawn, very, very good. So yeah, I can see why it picked up some traction. So it's pretty cool to see it make it onto the best of the rest graphic as well. On to day 2 then, saw a massive spike for Gholdengo, obviously up to 21% of the day 2 meta. Dragapult, Gardy, Charizard then obviously gets onto the graphic as well. Again, still split up, but combining these, it would be a combined 12%, which is around what we would expect. I think that sounds about right, especially given that Charizard got a lot of tools in this set, which is good. Gholdengo being 21% doesn't really surprise me. Like I say, I think it's by far the best deck, but also I still think there's no real reason not to play it a lot of the time, especially when we saw Mega Absol Kang was only 5%. Now, that's obviously still quite a bit of the field, but only some of them would have been playing Cornerstones. Some of the Gholdengos would have been playing Cornerstone Answers. So I feel like there actually wasn't a huge amount of like Gholdengo hate going into this tournament. I think this really felt like a metagame where people just wanted to play something that they knew rather than experimenting too much. Now, we did see a different deck or a slightly different archetype end up winning, but it felt like just off the back of LAIC and the success of I guess back-to-back tournaments of how Gholdengo was starting to rise and rise and rise, I'm not too surprised to see it converting really, really well. I think a lot of good players were also playing it as well, so that obviously boosts its win rate as well. It's a very, very consistent and good deck, to be honest. So yeah, not surprised to see it converting quite well. We'll get to the conversion rates in a moment as well. Best of the rest for day 2, obviously Unclassified drops off like a cliff, basically because most of the time that is the really rogue stuff. I think this Unclassified block is pretty much solely Mega Lopunny Dusknoir, I would assume, plus all of some of the niche stuff, some of the more rogue stuff. But I think a lot of this will be Mega Absol Kang. No, this is Mega Absol Kang. Will be Mega Lopunny Dusknoir. Mega Absol Kang still 5%. Sarah Ledge down to 3. Marnie's Grimstyle down to 3. Alakazam still at 3. And Raging Bolt making the graphic again. Still think it's a weird time to be a Raging Bolt player. I still think there's a lot of matchups that you're kind of wanting to dodge and weave, but here we are. Conversion rate wise, 25% for Gholdengo doesn't surprise me too much. Jelly Gardy, I think, is pulling away from Gardy, like non-Jelly Gardy right now, is the better way to play Gardy. I think it's not only better, but also evidently is becoming more popular. So I think we're starting to see that shift in the tide of what the best partner for Gardy is, whether it's Jellicent or whether it's just the one prize attackers and the Mews and the Lilies Clefairies. So not surprised to see that pulling away as the leader in terms of the different ways to play Gardevoir. The rest of the stuff, obviously Charizard, pretty much around a 20% conversion rate, whether it was with Dusknoir or not. Again, I still feel like this would be quite representative if we just combined these, but hey ho. And then Dragapult again, still seeing a relatively solid 20% conversion rate. So, I really feel like this just shows a lot of these decks are just the best decks to be playing right now, the most consistent decks to be trying to do well with, trying to convert into a day 2 with, is just the good stuff at the top. You can see from the meta share on day 2, when you start combining things, everything is, or the best 4 decks are by far the best 4 decks, and then we're hitting the 5%, the 3%, that kind of thing. So playing one of these 4 decks, Gholdengo, Gardevoir, Dragapult, or Charizard, feels like they are the leaders in the pack right now. On some more specific stats then, I guess, just taking a little bit more of a look without the variant grouping, we can see a little bit more about some of the numbers. As you can see, Lopunny Dusknoir, the main reason why I wanted to look at this is because it actually does split out Lopunny Dusknoir from Unclassified, and it actually was nearly as popular as Raging Bolt, which is pretty impressive. It's kind of a shame to see that that's the only new deck, the only new deck pretty much all the way down. I guess we've got Kang buff, which got a buff. There's actually 1.5% people playing that. We've got some Sharpedo Toxtricity as well. So there were a couple of new decks, but it's kind of sad to see the biggest impact of this new set was actually just one new Lopunny Dusknoir deck. But it's kind of what people expected from this set. It definitely feels like a set that's buffing archetypes rather than introducing new archetypes into the set or into the format. So I'm not too surprised by that. But yeah, just wanted to make note that was actually, like I say, I feel like a lot of the Unclassified from the original slide actually was broken down into the Lopunny Dusknoir stuff. And again, you can see that here, right, in the day 2, when we actually have the specific archetypes, Unclassified, actually all the way goes down to 1. Now, obviously, a lot of these things like Slacking and Rocket's Mewtwo all get caught in the unclassified stuff as well. But I think Lopunny Dusknoir would be on the, like, it probably should have been on the graphic if you take out the unclassified stuff, because it's the same as Alakazam and Raging Bolt, right? So it probably would have been on the graphic if we'd like split that stuff out properly. So it's clearly a thing. It's clearly a deck. I think it still needs to be refined. I actually got to play against one this weekend, and honestly, I was really impressed about what it could do. We saw some of it on stream as well, and there are a couple that did okay going into the tournament as well. So I'm not too surprised that it is an archetype. I think it still needs to be polished. It still needs to be refined, but yeah, seemed to be like a real archetype going forward, and one that people have to keep in mind. I'm not 100% sure how the archetype deals with Gholdengo, though, but we'll talk about that a little bit when we look at some of the lists. So yeah, on to results-wise. Obviously, 2,200 players is... it might be the biggest regional... No, I think Frankfurt was slightly bigger. I think Frankfurt was 2,400. So I think this is the second biggest regional of the format, or of the year in Europe so far. I'd have to fact-check that. But still, a pretty big regional. Ended up with a top 9 cut, so there was an 8th place playoff, 8th place asymmetrical cut. I can't remember who it was, I must admit. I can't remember who had to play. Obviously, it was Silas and someone else, but I can't remember quite who it was. I think it was one of the Dragapult players, but I could be wrong. But yeah, we ended up with a winner in Nikolai Stiborg, who played the new Charizard Noctowl archetype, which I'll go over in a moment. It was a really, really impressive archetype to watch. Obviously, it had been talked about a little bit on Twitter already. And it was actually a deck that, obviously, Charizard Noctowl has been a thing in the past, but it's never been super popular. But it does gain some huge buffs from Dawn in this set. So really cool to see a new archetype win, even though it is just like a spin on an old archetype. Still really cool to see it win. Obviously took down Alexander with his Dragapult deck in the final. The final was a little bit of a, I guess, anticlimax, because it was just... no one drawing great, or Alexander not drawing great. So it would have been cool to really see if Charizard is put to its paces by this Dragapult variant, or sorry, this Charizard variant is put to its paces by Dragapult, like Charizard often is. Obviously, typically in the past, Dragapult has been quite a bad matchup for Charizard. But Nikolai was able to best 2 of them in top 8 and in the final. He did say on his interview that he dodged them pretty much the whole way there. So still, I think yet to work out whether it is this build is good into Dragapult or not, or whether it was just some fortunate some fortunate favor in top 8 and some fortunate matchups in day 2 and day 1 that got the deck there. But it did at least feel like it had a really, really strong Gholdengo matchup in the game that I watched him play against. I think I can't remember who it was. It might have been Ufe. I think it was the top 4 match that I remember watching and thinking this had a really impressive Gholdengo matchup, which I think is a really important point at the moment, because I don't see Gholdengo changing in terms of how popular it is. Obviously, we had 3 Gholdengo in top 8, and then a raft of them throughout top 16. They dropped off a little bit until we get to around top 64, but again, you can see it's still really, really popular. I still think it's going to be incredibly popular. So having a good Gholdengo, if it does turn out after some more testing and after some more refinement of the list and more people playing it, some more statistics, if it turns out this Charizard list has a good Gholdengo, which Charizard obviously can tech to be a good Gholdengo with things like Chi-Yu. If you're able to do that with Nikolai's list, I think it has a real place in the metagame, trying to, I guess, counter some of the popularity of Gholdengo and trying to push it down. Did have 3 Gholdengo in top 8, like I say. Another Dragapult Dusknoir, and a Charizard Pidgeot from Oyvind, who is still repping this archetype, still one of the best Charizard players out there for sure. We had a 3rd Dusk, and then a Joltik Gholdengo box, which we will, or Gholdengo Joltik box, I guess is the right way around to talk about it, wrapping up the top 9. There's no Gardevoir in our top cut, but there was Kim Pabega playing Gardevoir Jellicent, as well as Rune, and then Sochi playing all of these players playing the Jellicent build. You can actually see all of the most successful Gardevoir builds were the Jellicent build. The first Gardevoir build that wasn't the Jellicent build was Raz, who played it to a 46th place finish. So again, not only do I feel like Gardevoir Jellicent is becoming more popular, I think it's becoming evident that it's the best way to play the deck, and it's going deeper in tournaments than the regular Gardevoir build. So it doesn't surprise me that switch is starting to happen. I think it has a better matchup into Gholdengo, though Gholdengos I think are getting more and more acquainted with how to deal with it. You'll see there was a lot of Levincia this weekend. I think it's getting more like it's more popular, or it does better against the Gholdengos. I think it does better into the mirror, and I think it actually can sometimes cause some issues for some of the other stage 2 decks. Not that I think Gardevoir always needed to have an answer for some of these stage 2 decks anyway, but it gives you a nice like item locking backdoor approach to try and slow some of the other stage 2 decks down as well, which again then Gardevoir can just ramp into a massive lead with things like Monkey Dory and stuff. So yeah, really doesn't surprise me that we're seeing this become the more popular and the more successful build. Hermione also playing the Charizard Pidgeot, and then, like I say, a raft of Gholdengo Lunatones into the top 16. One of which was Tamao, one of the friends of the channel who had a brilliant run. He kept it really simple and just played a Gholdengo list that didn't play any cornerstone counters, but did play a huge amount of mirror techs and kind of cards for the mirror to try and just win that mirror and try and hone in on people just playing Gholdengo as the most popular deck. And yeah, it worked out really well for him, so super pleased for him as well. Some really strong players in the top 16 as well, with obviously Kim and Hermione, like I've already mentioned, Rune as well as Owen Kammerman, Miloslav, some very, very strong players in the top 16. So another tournament where, once again, we're seeing some incredibly good players make it all the way through to the end, and really showing that I think there's a lot of skill into the format right now in terms of being able to like weave and find new lines and find important lines. It's not just a case of, you know, being a Gholdengo bot or being a Guardi bot or whatever. You're seeing very, very consistent good players go deep into tournaments once again, which is exactly what we want, to be honest. We want skill to be rewarded within the game. Rounding up some of the decks into the top 32 then, before I start looking at some lists in particular. Fabian got another top 32 finish with his Dragapult Blaziken. I think this might be the highest finish he's got. I actually can't check on this. I might have to fact check that, but I know he's obviously been repping this for a long time. He might have got, I can't remember whether it was 32, top 32 at LAIC. I can't remember where he finished, but obviously he's been repping this archetype, and it's still treating him really, really well. We had a Raging Bolt that made it through to the top 32. We had another Flareon, or a Flareon Noctowl, as well as a Kangaskhan Buffalant, which Joe definitely made sure to remind me of when we were talking about the results earlier on. Obviously, he was really championing this archetype, so he was super pleased to see one get a really good placement, which is, yeah, it's a really cool archetype. I played it against it at the weekend, and it's, yeah, it's actually pretty scary how buff Kangaskhan can get. It's something I worked out one turn I had to do like 440 damage or something just to be able to knock it out. So yeah, it's pretty crazy how big Kangaskhan's can get. And then, as you can see, we did have one Lopunny Dusknoir make it into the top 32 as well, which we will go over, as well as like 3 or 4 make it through to the top 64. There was 1, 2, 3, and I think there was a 4th. No, I think there were just 4. Yeah, there were top. So there were 3 in top 64 and 1 in top 32. So again, for the first time an archetype comes out, it's always pretty impressive to see. I haven't done too much dissecting on how different the lists were. Maybe we'll start to take a look when we go through some lists. But yeah, still looks like this probably is an archetype to think about and to consider, and is not just sort of a one-hit wonder or anything. So on some lists in particular then, and this was indeed Nikolai's first place list. This, yeah, is essentially like a combination of Charizard Noctowl, but also has a Pidgeot line, also has some Dusknoir in here. It's really tried to do it all, and the way it gets to do it all is down to Dawn. Dawn, obviously, a fantastic new supporter card that lets you search for a basic stage 1 and stage 2. That works perfectly with this kind of archetype. You can search for something like your Terapagos plus your Noctowl plus a Pidgeot, and then all you need to do is Noctowl for like the Candy Pidgeot, and all of a sudden you are cooking from there. So yeah, Dawn is a fantastic card for the Noctowl engine, being able to find your Terra and your Noctowl at once. And when you then get to, I already think it's quite good in some of the Terra decks, sort of like things like Terra Box and stuff like that. But then when you're also able to play it alongside stage 2s and get the value out of the stage 2 part of Dawn with Charizards and Pidgeots, you're then able to, you know, get the full value out of the card, and also then do something super powerful like set up quick search or set up a Charizard for game. So yeah, really, really cool archetype. I had seen like a little bit of talk about this archetype online, but I hadn't seen it also including the Dusknoir line. So that's pretty crazy that we managed to fit not only 3 stage 2s, but a thick stage 1 line in here as well. So yeah, pretty cool to see that. I really hadn't considered trying to put jamming all of this into one deck, but turns out just playing all of the good cards and then playing a really, really strong engine to be able to try and find all those good cards and weave together all of your powerful turns is just really good. Obviously, you've still got things like Briar and Prime Catcher for some very, very highly aggressive or very powerful turns. So yeah, the archetype is just, it feels like this archetype is just trying to, it doesn't have like too many flashy things. It's not got anything crazy, but just having the power, that like the super high power level cards of things like Dusknoir, Briar, Prime Catcher, and then a really solid engine behind them just feels really, really powerful. So yeah, I'm really going to enjoy trying out this archetype again. I tried it a little bit when the set first came out and my list looked nothing like this. So I needed a good list to build off of, and I think this is a really cool one to try out. I'm interested, like I say, to see how this list ends up, I guess, converting into, or has ended up playing against Dragapult. Just going over to his matchups here. Obviously, he didn't play any Dragapult day one. ID'd with one on day two, and then did beat one in top 8 and beat one in the finals. Obviously, I don't think we saw that top 8 game. I think we had Drew on in top 8, so I don't think we saw this top 8 game, but would be interested to hear a little bit about how that went. Obviously, we saw the finals where it was, I guess, some rough draws from Alexander's side. But yeah, very interested to see whether this archetype or whether this way of playing Charizard does convert well into Dragapult or not, because I think that's the biggest question mark for Charizard. It's always been its Dragapult matchup. Obviously, there's some people that actually feel like the Gardevoir matchup is still pretty favoured as well from the Gardevoir side, but there's also some very, very strong believers on the other side that feel Charizard is super favoured into Gardevoir. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of a 50-50, a bit of an up in the air, but it's pretty universally agreed that Dragapult is a bad matchup for Charizard. Yet the results show differently in this tournament, so we'll have to do some more testing with this archetype and see how it matches into Charizard. Obviously, there's not a huge, how it matches into Dragapult. Obviously, there's not a huge amount different to this list in terms of like why this would be better into Charizard. Into Dragapult. So I don't really know. Like, I can't see personally why this is better into Dragapult. Dragapult based on the cards in the list. There's nothing like crazy to me that stands out as like this is a Dragapult tech or anything like that. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing whether the results into Dragapult follow this deck or not, and I think I need to play some games with this deck against Dragapult to see whether it just feels like another Charizard deck, and Nikolai had some sort of like good fortune in some of those matchups on day 1 and day 2 and in the top 8 and final, or whether actually there's something about this deck that I'm not seeing right now. If there is, let me know down in the comments as well. There might be something that I'm missing that's super obvious, but I really feel like there's nothing that stands out that like other Charizard lists didn't do. I guess like in a way you don't necessarily need you're less reliant on items because you can knock down rather than having to set up Pidgeot. But again, you're only playing one Charmeleon, you're still a Rare Candy engine, so it's not like Budju isn't affecting you or anything like that. And we're not even playing a Pidgeotto, so it's not even like we have the backdoor Evo plan into Budju like some Charizard decks do have. So yeah, there's nothing that stands out to me here that says this should have a better Dragapult matchup, other than the results saying it should. So yeah, need to do some more testing. Definitely let me know down below if there's anything that I'm missing in terms of why this seemed to perform better into Dragapult, or whether we need to do some more testing to lock that matchup up. On to Dragapult then, this was Alexander's list. I think he said this is actually the same 60 as his list from Lille, which is pretty funny because evidently if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's still a very solid list. I also saw another stat. I think this list has something in the 40s or 50s or maybe even 60s in terms of placements now. So I think this is pretty definitively the most cookie cutter Dragapult list. There's nothing too surprising here. I've realized you obviously can't quite see the Blood Moon Ursaluna here, but there is a Blood Moon just beneath my camera. I think this is pretty much established as the most cookie cutter Dragapult list. If you're looking to try and pick up this archetype, this has a lot of results now, not just from Alexander, even though it is a regional winning and regional second place list. It's also the most popular Dragapult list in the Mega Evolution format, I believe, in terms of results as well. So yeah, most cookie cutter list, nothing really to say here other than just high counts of things. We've got things like the Churro and the double jamming tower and all of these kinds of things to make sure we've got outs into all of the different things in the format. We've still got access to things like Monkey Dory as well. I've never been the biggest fan of Monkey Dory in Dragapult personally, but again, the results don't lie. This is the best Dragapult list out there right now. So I think it's completely fine to play it. Obviously, it's just a personal preference for me. But yeah, it's like I say, it's really nothing special. It's super cookie cutter, but it's really leaning into I don't need to do anything special because Dragapult is just broken. And when I can consistently set up Dragapult and have the the board wipe potential of Dusclops, Dusknoir plus Dragapult after item locking my opponent for turns, it's just devastating. And we saw that in some of the games that Alexander played this weekend. He set up some really, really powerful turns with like double Dusclops and stuff like that to take out multiple boards or multiple Pokemon on a board and really like cripple the opponent. So yeah, definitely the list I would be trying out if I'm jumping on the Dragapult train. I'm not sure whether it's a great time to or not. It feels like an okay time to, especially with Charizard winning. If it does turn out that Dragapult is still, or this version of Dragapult is still just as or this version of Charizard is still just as weak into Dragapult as some of the other Charizard builds, I think it's a great time to be picking up Dragapult. I still think you're somewhat scared of, like, you still have to play somewhat awkwardly at times into Gholdengo, but I have also seen some Gholdengo lists starting to cut Picnic Basket, which again helps you try and go for the board wipe option with Dragapult, trying to set up double Phantom Dive over 2 turns to wipe out their whole board of all the Gimme Ghouls and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely a good time to at least try out this cookie cutter Dragapult list and just get some reps with it and understand kind of what the deck can do. Our highest placing Gholdengo list was Ufe, who placed third. Again, saw some pretty cool plays from the deck during the weekend. This actually played a single Dark Energy and a Monkey Dory as like something slightly different compared to, we've got people sort of leaning into Levincia, people sort of leaning into Cram. This played the Monkey Dory plus Dark, which again means that you can cut the Picnic Basket because you're essentially trying to stop your opponent from setting up a lot of damage on your board and then trying to board wipe you things like Devo or Dragapult or Dusknoir, all of that kind of stuff. So having the Monkey Dark can definitely help with that. Also helps as a damage mod as well when there's definitely going to be situations when you don't have to necessarily get rid of an extra energy because you've got enough damage on your board for Monkey Dory to push you over the line with Make It Rain, or even like in combination with things like Cosmic Beam to help you push over the line against some of the basics that may be out of range of your Cosmic Beam. Now we do play a Premium Power Pro and a Vit Band, so we can still take out other like 110 HP Pokemon, which is really important for Solrock, but we do have the Monkey Dory in there to be able to help with that as well. Also play the Lana's Aid. Lana's Aid, I think, is becoming, again, increasingly popular in terms of an answer for Gardevoir Jellicent decks Frillish spamming you. Lana's Aid getting you back 3 energy to help you have enough energy to get over the line against all the Frillish that they can throw at you. I think from talking to Gholdengo players and how they've been like testing the matchup and how they've been testing Lana's Aid, I think from what I understand, Lana's Aid is like the perfect amount of energy you need to be able to deal with the Frillish spam over and over again if you play all of your energy as damage mods as you hope to, and you get them back as and when you can. Obviously, the arguably safer way of doing this is with double Lightning plus Levincia, but Lana's Aid is kind of like a one turn charge of getting some energy back, but sometimes that's all you need. You don't need multiple energy across multiple turns. You just need one more turn to get one more knockout to try and either break the lock or just win the game. Other than that, nothing too crazy. Prime Catcher over Secret Box. Obviously, I think there's quite a big debate right now whether Secret Box is the right ace spec for Gholdengo or whether Prime Catcher is right. I'm a fan of Prime Catcher primarily because I think it's slightly better into the mirror. And I think the mirror is still really important to have a good matchup into. I think you need like 2-ish cards for the mirror right now, whether that's Cram, whether that's Prime, whether that's an extra boss, whether that's... well, I guess Premium Power Pro plus Vit Band is 2 cards, but I see that as like a 1-card package. I think you need to have ways to be able to take 2 or 3 prizes through Soul Rocks. One of them being Prime Catcher or an additional... gusting option to not have to go through a Soul Rock. You can just go through a Gimme Ghoul. One of them being Premium Power Pro plus Vit Band to be able to knock out a Soul Rock. And then I've come around to be a massive Cram believer. I initially didn't like Cramorant at all. I'm now a massive Cram believer and think it's really, really good and very, very powerful into the mirror. So Again, for me personally, I'd be probably cutting the Monkey Dory for a crown and just flipping the Dark Energy back to a fighting, because that's the other thing that you've had to cut with this list, is one less fighting energy, which most of the time doesn't matter, but there will be situations where it stops you from lunar cycling or cosmic beaming. So yeah, for me, I think I would go with that. If I wasn't playing a Cornerstone out, obviously you do need to then also keep in mind whether you need to play a Cornerstone out or not, whether that's Morwar, whether that's the Lopunny line, whether that's Mega Lucario, anything like that. Again, for me, Morwile I think is the best, but yeah, a lot of players I think this weekend chose not to play. I didn't see many Morwiles. I think there were a couple from, I think Daniel Magner and Drew Stevenson played, which we'll get to the list in a moment. I think they played Morwile. Lopunny seemed to not be too popular. Again, I haven't gone through and looked at every single Gholdengo result. I've just looked at like the top 8 ones, but none of the deep running ones got or did very well with Mega Lopunny. So we might need to work out whether that's still the right answer or whether Morwile is still just the best answer. But either way, like I say, Ufe didn't actually play a Gholdengo, play a Cornerstone answer, sorry, and instead played the Monkey Dory package over that. Another Dragadusk list. I think this is almost identical, however, did play a single Dawn from Christian D'Onofrio, who finished in 4th place. Did play a Dawn, I think, looking at that. That's pretty much the only difference. Played one less Dusclops compared to Alexander. One less Dusclops and one Dawn looks to be pretty much the only difference, other than the candies, obviously. I guess the candies are the important thing, but I was just looking from a supporter perspective whether there's... Might be playing one less boss. I've closed the list now, but might be playing one less boss. I can't remember. But yeah, did play a candy build instead. Just 2 candies, so not leaning in with the full 4. But I don't hate just playing a couple of candies. Obviously, candy gets considerably worse the more popular Jellyguardy gets and the more popular Dragapult gets. But I do think it gives you the backdoor option of being able to have a really, really powerful turn 2 Phantom Dive option, if you're able to, I guess, weave the candies together on the second turn of the game. It's quite difficult to do with only 2 rare candy. Again, maybe you're going to try and Lily into them plus Dracloak, so it's not impossible. But only having 2 does make it not super consistent. But the one thing it does do is it does let you double Dusknoir quite nicely. Now, I would, in candy builds, I really personally like to see 3 Stretcher, because I think you can lean into like really powerful Dusknoir turns, letting you go, like if your board is like Dusclops plus Duskull, you can evolve into Dusknoir, Curse Blast, and then Night Stretcher, Rare Candy, Curse Blast again with Dusknoir. So I would like to see the 3rd Stretcher, I think, in this list. But again, you're like, now we have so many good supporters for Dusknoir, right, for Dragapult right now. We're kind of getting to the point where we've got this critical mass that you have to start cutting them. And obviously, Christian played 2 Hilda plus 1 Dawn. And still played the full count of things like Iona and Lily, which is pretty standard at this point, and played the Churro, so you have to eat into some spaces somewhere, and I guess Night Stretcher was the card that was cut. Both of these lists, obviously, so far we've seen playing double Jamming Tower. Some lists definitely had cut down to 1. I'd be interested to know whether some of these players committed to playing 2 still because of Battle Cage. Obviously, we haven't seen any Battle Cage so far, so hard to know whether if they did play them for that reason, whether it was worth it or not. But yeah, interesting to know whether, because we saw no Battle Cage, or we haven't seen any Battle Cage so far in the top 4 that we've seen, and I think that trend, as you'll see, continues to go down to some of the later results. What's interesting to note is that with back up to 2 Jamming Tower, obviously that was what Alexander played in his winning list and in this weekend's list. I think there will have been a bit of respect for Battle Cage this weekend, so I'm not too surprised to see Jamming Tower. But it also doesn't look like Jamming Tower, Battle Cage, was that popular in some of the most successful archetypes. And therefore, it's going to be interesting to see whether people start cutting the Jamming Towers because they're not too worried about Battle Cage anymore. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the more interesting developments that we're going to have with Dragapult over the next few weeks in the next few tournaments for sure. Next up then, we have Oyvind's 5th place Charizard list. Obviously, he's been mainly in this archetype for a long time, tweaking it bit by bit here and there. And again, it's still a pretty similar list to the one he's always been playing, with things like the Mesa Goza, the Jet Energies, obviously. the Klefki, the Tatsugiri, all of that kind of stuff. Some updates here with the new Charmander and Charmeleon, but ultimately this is a pretty Oyvind style list, very similar to the ones of the past. Going to be interesting to see whether there's a big transition between, or whether there's a sort of discussion whether this is the best way to play Charizard, or whether the winning list, the Noctowl list, is the best way. I can see people picking up this list and trying to continue with this one because this is the familiar one, but also the new list is the winning list, and obviously is kind of the new and shiny one. So I think it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks for online tournaments. I'm really hoping that we're able to in the online tournaments differentiate whether they're Charizard Pidgeot Noctowl builds or Charizard Pidgeot builds, because I think it's going to be interesting to sort of track those two different streams of Charizard decks going forward. But yeah, nothing too crazy with this list. Pretty standard. It's still his signature secret box style build with, nothing too crazy, just some updates to the Charmander, Charmeleon lines overall. Onto the 6th place list. This was Daniel Magna. Him and Drew Stevenson, I'm pretty sure, played... Oh, no, they did play slightly different lists. I thought they played identical lists, but Drew played the Levincia package, whereas Daniel just... Daniel didn't. Daniel just played a more standard 60. Did play the Mormole like I thought. I saw that Drew also did as well. And again, there's this debate at the moment whether Secret Box or Prime Catcher is the right a spec to be playing in the Gholdengo Lunar Rock deck. I'm pretty sure, personally, I prefer Prime Catcher, but I can see why Secret Box is so good. It gets you... it gets you the tools on the important turns. It gets you Artisan, which we're only playing one of in this build, so it's really important to have an extra out to it through your Arven. But we do also obviously still have a high Nest Ball plus Fighting Gong count. I do like this count of 433. I think playing a high count of Ball Search is really, really good, because most of the time I think Gholdengo just wants to get into the game, and once you're into the game, the deck draws so many cards that the rest is fine, but you need to get into the game to start drawing those cards. We do have the Mawile in here as the cornerstone counter, as well as I think I remember him mentioning that it, or it might have been Drew actually mentioning that it does a couple of other things, a couple of other nice things in other matchups. But ultimately, it's in here as a cornerstone counter, which is really important. And yeah, other than that, this is just a super standard 60. Again, purely a personal preference thing, but I prefer Super Rod to Night Stretcher. That's another card that sort of flip-flops between what you're trying to target. I feel like Night Stretcher is obviously a much more aggressive card, but I think the Super Rod helps your mirror out a little bit more, because you're able to recycle Soul Rocks a little bit easier, or recycle more Soul Rocks to try and still maintain that one prize board state for as long as possible. But you can still do that with Night Stretcher as well. So yeah, pretty standard list from Daniel. And then the only slight differences from Drew here is just playing the Levincia and the double lightning energy to be able to have a solid answer into things like item lock, because obviously then you're able to just freely get some energy back every turn under item lock, even if you just get one turn of Levincia. Similar to the Lana's Aid, I think that's often enough to then get you over the line against the item lock frillish spam option that the Jelly Guardies often try and do against you. So yeah, playing the Levincia package to try and counter that. Also dropping to 3 Gholdengo. I have noticed a few lists dropping to 3 Gholdengo. I don't hate it, but it does scare me when you're dropping one and prizing one that you sometimes end up with just 2 Gholdengos on board. And I feel like sometimes you need a little bit more draw than that, but do still have Lunar Cycle as well, so maybe it's fine. Maybe that's just me getting twitchy about nothing. The final top 8 list was Paolo's list, which is just another Dragapult Dusknoir list. Again, this is pretty standard. There's nothing crazy about this list. It's just another very, very cookie cutter list. It might even be identical to Alexander's. I need to compare it card for card, but it's certainly close. And then the 9th place finish from Silas, playing Joltik Gholdengo. Again, an archetype that typically can perform quite well into Gholdengo, because you're able to sometimes set up double Pikachu. However, Silas did play only one Pikachu and played the Galvantula EX as well, which is interesting. Again, helps as like a cornerstone out, helps as an out to. There was another archetype that I remember. I think it was one of the casters talking about how it's powerful. It might not have been this tournament. I can't remember. But yeah, playing the Galvantula EX to help you, I guess, give you an option to try and hit for 220. It is. With the charge web attack, which is a little bit more efficient than some of these other attackers. I think it's probably in here like primarily as a bit of additional support against Cornerstone, because ultimately like you don't want to have to just amp or Iron Hands your way through them. It's kind of a 2-for-2 trade, I guess 3-for-2 if you're able to amp them if you arm press them first, but ultimately I feel like Galvantula is just a better way of doing that. But I think it often is at the sacrifice of a Pikachu slot, and I think double Pikachu is really important because double Pikachu feels like it's really important against Gholdengo. But yeah, I could have missed something there. Please let me know in the comments if I've missed anything else about this Galvantula. Other than that, it's a pretty like trying to lean into the supporter. It's a list that's trying to lean into the support account. When we first saw this deck, obviously it had a pretty wacky support account, and I think it had quite a low Pokegear count. I'm really pleased to see this Pokegear count going up because it's another deck that essentially its draw power is entirely reliant on Fez, so you need, well, until you get your Gholdengo. So in the early game, you really need to be finding your supporters every turn. And given that like some of your supporters aren't really draw supporters, you don't have a huge amount of draw. So you want to be able to build a board that can then get you into Gholdengos, which can then get you drawing to help you get there. And because of that, you basically always need to have like Arven or Brock on turn 1. So despite not, I guess like we haven't maxed the Brock count, but in maxing Arven plus 3 Brock plus 4 Pokegear, we should theoretically be trying to get into multiple basics very, very often. There's lots of ways we can do it, and it does mean that you're super sad when you can't do it. It does mean that you're super sad when you end up whiffing, because I don't think we can really go much higher than this playing the quad Pokegear plus Arven. But yeah, it does try and get you into the game as much as possible, get you into the Joltik as often as possible there as well. Obviously, also playing the Levincia. Again, I think there's been times where we've seen things like Artisan and stuff. I remember for some of the post-world lists, I'm sure had Artisan in here, which felt a little bit weird rather than just leaning into this. But yeah, Levincia plus the Gholdengo package to try and have that big bang against some of the evolving stuff, and then the classic, you know, combination of things like Iron Hands plus Pikachu, plus I guess things like Galvantula for different matchups. So yeah, it's a deck that I have never really gelled with personally, but I'm glad to see it doing well. Like I say, I think it has a really, really positive matchup into Gholdengo. If you're able to charge up Pikachu, charge up double Pikachu, it's a little bit harder. Obviously, you can just charge them all to the same Pikachu, but I guess it's no different actually, because you can charge them to 2 different Pikachus. You can hit with one and they can gust hit the other. But if you charge them all to 1 Pikachu, they can gust hit the one, and then you get your first value out of Topaz Bolt, but then they've reset your ability, right? So Resolute Heart isn't online, so they're able to wipe an extra 3 energy off. So yeah, I think I slightly prefer just having the second Pikachu out for the important matchups that Pikachu is important for. But again, it's a archetype that I can't say I am super familiar with, so I don't want to pass too much judgment. I already feel like I am missing things with things like the Galvantula and stuff. So yeah, it's not when I feel super familiar with post testing it, like just after Worlds, in all fairness. Onto Kim's 10th place, the highest placing Gardevoir list. We're still doing this 2-1-2 Gardevoir line, which really, really worries me. I didn't like this when we first saw it. I still think it's kind of cringe, but I guess it works out. And obviously there's some very, very strong players doing well with the archetype with a line this thin. Personally, still think it's a little bit iffy, but Kim was able to do well with it. Playing the 2-2 Jellicent line, as well as playing the brand new Mega Diancie, obviously really helpful for trying to deal with some of the dark decks. But also, I saw sort of sat around me a lot of people using this against some of the more aggressive decks where Mega Diancie, they just couldn't KO in the early turns because of its ability, plus its raw amount of HP that it was easily able to take like 2 or 3 prizes. Yes, it often then went down, lost 2-3 prizes, but at that point you've then built up your Monkey Dory army, you've built up all of the things that you're then able to try and do with Gardevoir. So I saw it being used quite a lot as an early game attacker where you weren't necessarily using Frillish, more so I guess in non-Frillish builds, but I did see some Frillish builds doing it as well. But the biggest thing about Mega Diancie is obviously it's just so scary to have such a weak Pokemon as a potential starter against things like Gholdengo, which is the most popular archetype, right? Like, yes, it's a very, very small percentage point that you're going to be against Gardevoir, you're going to be against Gholdengo, and you only start Mega Diancie. But I know for a fact there will be games you 100% lose because of that, which is why really, like, something about me just says we need to be playing more Ralts, because you even in the matchups where your opponent's playing Gholdengo and they have the opportunity to turn one Lunar Cycle and then Cosmic Beam against your Ralts, you still would rather that situation than just having this Mega Diancie sat on your board that can eventually just be 3 prizes. Now, Kim did play the Churro, but I still think Mega Diancie has to go in the deck, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't like that it's going in the deck at the same time as us also cutting down on the Ralts line, because it feels like more than ever you don't want to start this Pokemon, right? So yeah, that's just a personal thing. I don't know whether it's just because I don't like the 2-1-2 Ralts thing and I think it's like super greedy that I want to find a reason to say you need to play more Ralts, or whether I just need to get over myself. I don't know. But yeah, 2 Ralts just really, really, really makes my toes curl. I just think it's so risky. It's so important for Guardy to get set up. I guess you have more time. In the Jelly build, you're able to slow your opponent down, so I guess it is more fine. Yeah. Maybe it's more fine than I'm giving it credit for in the Frillish Jelly build, but yeah. Kind of interesting support account, just playing the Ionos, Lilies, and then the single Churro, so no additional draw supporters in terms of like research or anything, no Arvans, anything like that. No cheeky bosses that we saw a couple of Gardevoir's playing in the past, often to try and get around Jellicent, but also just as a more reliable gusting option. I think one of the most counterable things about Gardevoir right now is its lack of gust, it all being item based and stuff like that, which hence why the Jelly Guardy is more popular right now, because you're able to sort of like grief the mirror a little bit more. But yeah, other than that, a pretty standard build, still playing all of the relevant tools and stadiums. Not tools. Well, I meant Ace Spec and stadiums. The tools obviously still in here for Screamtail, and I guess Bravery Charm applies to a lot. But we did see some success from some LEIC lists that were playing Jellicent as well as the Drifloon package. Obviously, cutting out the Drifloon here, I think Mega Diancie stands in for Drifloon quite a lot of the time. But I could see it as like moving around and playing in different. Playing this kind of game of what attackers is Gardevoir playing. I could potentially actually see Mega Diancie sometimes coming out in favour of Drifloon and an extra Bravery Charm if you're able to find a slot here and there. Again, if Gholdengo continues to be popular, I think Drifloon is a really, really powerful card against Gholdengo. Obviously way more so than Mega Diancie. Though, with Charizard winning, Dark is potentially back on a really, really popular, or Dark is a really, really popular type to be again. So that then leads into Diancie being really good again. So yeah, I think this is, like I say, the only thing I really don't like about the Guardy lists that we're seeing at the moment is just the kind of cringe Ralts count, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. This was the 27th place list from Noah playing the Creamy Kang. I really should probably have invited Joe on for this portion of the video because he has played so much more of this archetype than me. So nothing like he would be able to immediately shout if there's any cards that stand out or any counts that stand out. But this looks pretty familiar to the kinds of lists we'd been talking about, and I think ultimately, if he would have been at Stuttgart this weekend, this probably would have been the archetype that he'd been playing. We talked a little bit about it in our testing group as a potential archetype to play as well. And this looks pretty familiar to the lists that we were talking about. So nothing crazy here, just trying to be as big and buff as possible with Mega Kang, with the use of Buffalant and Bravery Charm. And then the Jumbo Ice Creams, once your opponent has started to hit into you, trying to get a huge amount of healing. These definitely caught me off guard. I played against this archetype at the weekend. I played Mega Absol. This definitely caught me off guard at times. I was trying to set up for a 2-shot and just had to really hope that they weren't able to like double Jumbo Ice Cream me and completely wipe my board. Could often deal with a single Jumbo Ice Cream. Double Jumbo Ice Cream often is such a massive reset, especially when you're already reducing so much damage with Buffalant and you already have so much HP with Bravery Charm and Lively Stadium, that double Jumbo Ice Cream can sometimes literally alone just be a game-winning play. So yeah, it's a very, very cool archetype. I need to play some more with it. I played Absol this weekend, but this was another consideration, and it does look fun. It doesn't feel like it has as much broken stuff it can do as Absol, like snagging cards from the hand and stopping your opponent from being able to do cool stuff. This feels a lot more honest in terms of like, doesn't do anything broken, but just says, I'm going to take 6 prizes before you because you're not going to have enough damage. You're not going to be able to deal enough damage to my Pokemon before you can take 6 prizes. So yeah, an archetype I definitely want to try a little bit more. And I know Joe put a lot of time into this and has had a look at this list, and was super pleased to see it do well. So yeah, also pleased to see the archetype do well, especially when it's it's something a little bit different. We've seen Tanky Kang in the past, never really took off, and Absol Kang came out and looked to be the more popular archetype, but Jumbo Ice Cream looks like it might have revived this archetype. This was the highest place Lopunny Dusknoir list from Simon at the 28th place. I did really want to look into this list. I haven't looked at any of the Lopunny Dusknoir lists yet, so this is going to be a pretty much live reaction, my first thoughts on these. I did play against one, like I say, at the weekend, and honestly, it really impressed me, the amount of damage it could churn out. Yeah, Gale Thrust plus Curse Blast does 360, which is just absurd, to be honest. It's actually crazy. Yes, you're giving up 1 prize to do it, and yes, you have a 3 prizer on board to be able to attack, to be able to do the attack. But I had Mega Absols, Mega Kangaskhan's completely destroyed in 1 turn because of that combo, and honestly, I was sat there like, wow, this is pretty cool. My biggest concern is the fact that this deck's draw engine is 1 Kangaskhan, 1 Fez, Pidgeot, which is obviously great, and then Enriching Energy. All of them very, very situational. Kang, I felt like was the biggest liability on my opponent's board when I was playing against it. Now, I will hold my hands up, I did lose the matchup, so it didn't obviously go amazingly well, but I did win a game and was 1 turn away from winning another game, and definitely on one of those games, the reason was Kang was on the board. So I think there's going to be matchups where you don't want to bench Kang, and if you don't want to bench Kang, you basically have no draw outside of Enriching Energy until you set up Pidgeot. Now, sometimes that will be fine because your hand will get you to setting up Pidgeot, and from then you don't need to draw any cards because you're just searching for the perfect card every turn. But there will be times where you don't weave Pidgeot in and you use your Enriching Energy, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, so I'm actually now pretty much out of draw unless I bench this Kangaskhan or I just raw draw into the cards I need with Lily. And that's kind of scary. Now, a lot of the times you just want like Hilda for energy plus like one of the Dusknoir pieces or the Lopunny or whatever. But there's definitely times where you need to find things like Candy and stuff, and there was a lot of situations. I haven't watched the stream games back of this deck yet. I really need to, but it felt like there were a lot of situations when my opponent was playing it where they would support her and their turn would kind of like stop there, right? Because there was no draw to then be had. So that's the biggest thing that concerns me about this deck, is not having a reliable draw engine if you don't have access to Pidgeot. And when it's only a 1/1/1 line, like, there'll be times where any of these pieces can be prized and it's kind of awkward and you can't get there. There might even be argument to be playing like a 202 line instead and say, we don't get Pidgeot out against item lock. We quite literally cannot do that. But in all the other games where we're not getting item locked, we're never screwed over by prizing Pidgey or Pidgeot, which can happen right now. So yeah, I'm interested to see how this archetype develops. I really want to play some of this archetype and try it out. And I'm really looking forward to seeing whether this becomes like a mainstay. The biggest question mark for me right now is, like I say, the draw engine behind the deck, and whether Kang plus Enriching gets you to Pidgeot enough to then be fine for the rest of the game. If this is how all of the lists were playing, if this is how all the lists were built, there's obviously a big reliance on Pidgeot potentially at times, and therefore it getting Gus KO'd is, lights out potentially. The deck really felt like it struggled against Iono when I played against it, so I think there's some things to be ironed out, but I do think there is a lot of potential here. Lopunny is such an unbelievably efficient card that I think it makes sense that just pairing it with a really broken Dusknoir package or something makes sense. So yeah, very, very interested to see whether this archetype develops, and I think it's probably going to be the archetype that I'm trying out myself over the next few weeks to see whether the draw engine is fine or whether it needs to be slightly adjusted, and whether we can get even the Dunsparce package in here instead of the Pidgeot might be more reliable. I don't know. We'd have to wait and see. But yeah, definitely an interesting one, and one that I am invested in trying to see or trying to get some reps with for sure. And finally, I just wanted to have a quick shout out to a random Cynthia's Garchomp list that ended up getting top 35. Didn't quite make top 32, but did finish 35 place. This one just stood out to me as I was scrolling down through top 32. This one just made it outside, and there was also things like a slacking list as well, but this was the one I wanted to pick out just because I think Cynthia's Garchomp is a bit of a fan favorite. There's actually no new cards in this, but it evidently shows you that I think the archetype can work. This deck still has a massive draw engine problem. I think you don't have a great draw engine. You really need to rely on raw drawing your cards very well, and hoping that Corkscrew Drive gets you there, because outside of Corkscrew Drive, if you don't get set up, you don't have a draw engine to get set up, if that makes sense. So you have to rely on Corkscrew Drive, and then when you're holding a load of cards and you're not in a position where you can draw a lot, Corkscrew Drive is obviously got a pretty low ceiling. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting archetype. I just wanted to shout it out because it's not often you see a Cynthia's Garchomp do as well as top 64, top 64, yeah, just outside top 32. Actually had the same record for top 32, as did the slacking deck from Bernardo Diaz as well. So yeah, really interesting results. Like I say, I think the biggest takeaways are whether this Charizard build can compete with Dragapult or not. Excuse me. Whether the winning Charizard build from Nikolai becomes the more popular one over things like Oyvind's and Hermione's. Whether Gholdengos continue to respect Frillish and that kind of thing, but also not necessarily respect, or whether they continue to respect Cornerstone or not. Obviously, like I say, Daniel and Drew did, but Ufe didn't. So how that's going to evolve. And then also, finally, whether the Mega Lopunny archetype is a real thing or not. It feels like it's super efficient. It feels like there's a lot to it. And I'm, very invested to seeing whether that turns into a real archetype or whether it was a bit of a one-hit wonder. I'm definitely going to, like I say, going to be trying it out and seeing whether it works out and stuff like that, and whether we can, whether the draw engine it's currently got is enough, or whether it needs something more. I don't know. Have to wait and see. But yeah, this was the last tournament before the end of the year. We are hopefully going to have a top 10 decks out in the next few days for you going into the new year. And then our first tournament back in Toronto is in about 6 weeks' time. So we've got a pretty big gap between now and then. But there is a Champions League this weekend in Japan where we can see more of this format, plus some of the new Ascended Heroes cards coming out. So still lots of Pokemon to go on between now and Toronto in about 6 weeks' time. And then we're back in Europe for Birmingham Regionals, which is the week after Toronto. So yeah, it's going to be another interesting cycle where we're going to have a long period of delay between the next tournament, and then we're going to have 2 back-to-back weekends to try and react to some of these results as well. So yeah, let me know if there's anything I missed down in the comments below. It's been a while since I've done one of these summaries, so appreciate it may have been rusty. I really appreciate some feedback as always. Let me know if there's any lists that I missed out on talking, or any cards that I talked about that I've missed some obvious synergies for. I'm always interested to try and make sure I'm understanding and improving all that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, feedback down in the comments is always really appreciated. Make sure you drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and other than that, I will see you guys in another video soon. Thanks for watching.